Welcome to Everything About You Matters, a relational, clinical, social work podcast. My aim with my guests is to discover the myriad ways clinical social workers make sense of the human experience and build toward a more just world, one person, family, and community at a time. I'm your host, Lance Peterson, a licensed independent clinical social worker and social work professor in the Morrison Family College of Health School of Social Work at the University of St. Thomas. Today with my guest, Quinnita Abraham, I am exploring school social work practice. Quinnita is a dedicated school social worker and educator with over 15 years of experience supporting students in school communities. A graduate of the University of St. Thomas and St. Catherine University MSW program class of 2010, Quinnita has built a career grounded in compassion, collaboration, and a deep understanding of the social and emotional needs of students. Throughout her career, she has worked extensively across grade levels, 11 years with secondary students, grades 6 through 12, and the past 5 years with elementary students, K through 5. This broad experience has given her a comprehensive perspective on the evolving role of social workers in educational settings. Since joining the University of St. Thomas as an instructor in 2017, Quinnita has continued to share her expertise with MSW students, now entering her 9th year of teaching. She values the complexity of these dynamics and remains deeply committed to fostering social emotional learning and well-being within her school communities. Quinnita, welcome to Everything About You Matters. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I am really excited to have a school social worker on. School social work practice has always been near and dear to me, even though that was never an area I went into. I had thought that was where I was going to end up after my MSW program, and it just kind of never panned out. I ended up in outpatient mental health, so I'm really excited to hear about the work that you do. Mm-hmm. To start, maybe if you could just describe your clinical practice, what you do in your role as a school social worker, so that can be services provided, obligations within the school system, et cetera.
Yes. So I want to start by saying this is just my personal experience. Every school social worker had maybe have a different experience. So everything I'm sharing is from my personal experience. And depending on the school and the setting, I would say my role looks very different, right? When I was working in secondary, I always worked with special education, right? So students that have individual education plans, and for a variety of reasons, whether it's autism, behavior, learning disability, cognitive disability. And when I was in that setting, at one school, I was able to provide assessments. And part of the evaluation process is that you evaluate the students and you use assessment tools. And the assessment tools that I was able to assess students was the BASC, which is like the Behavior Assessment System for Children. That's what the BASC stands for. And then the BRIEF is a behavior rating inventory of executive functioning. So that's what I use through that assessment.
In your defense, that's a hard acronym to remember.
I know. Oh my gosh, letters. Where's the R? Okay. So yeah. So I was able to provide that a part of the evaluation team, and then now in my role, I work with general education students, meaning I work with students without IEPs. And so I am not necessarily a part of the assessment team. I'm more a part of the intervention team. So I'm part of the problem-solving teams. Like a teacher comes to us every week and describes like a concern they have, whether it's academic or behavior. And we come together to provide interventions. So before kids gets evaluated, they usually go through 12 weeks of intervention, unless the parent requests it. And so I'm part of that team. So usually I'm on the intervention team. I'm part of the intervention. Like I'm collecting data, following up with the team to see if there's growth or progress, to make sure we rule out that with an intervention, this kid doesn't need an evaluation for IEP. So,
Okay, so what I'm hearing then is that when you do, typically in, at least in the school settings you found yourself, is that you have an assessment team. That's where you use like the brief and the BASC that you talked about. And then once that assessment is completed, others enter in to do the intervention. Is that how that works?
vice versa. So
Oh, okay.
I provide, like now, because I work with gen ed students, so they don't have an IEP.
Sure,
So I
okay.
provide the interventions before they go through that assessment team.
I see.
So
Okay.
I'm saying, like, I've worked with this kid and we've used this curriculum for 12 weeks and they haven't grown and their behavior continues. And so then we'll recommend an evaluation. And that team is the team that provides the BASC or brief or, the different testing, like the home and family interview and all that stuff.
Okay, that is really good for us to know, because we typically think of assessment intervention as occurring
Simultaneously.
well, or at least, or even a different chronological order, right?
Yeah.
Which, truthfully, in clinical practice, they never really do. I think simultaneous is really a better way to do it. But in this case, it's the intervention that's already kind of geared towards wherever the expected developmental level of the child is to be. And then if we're seeing that progress isn't being made, that's when you're saying, hey, we need to have the assessment team look at this child and administer these measures to see if there might be some other things going on where we need to have maybe more targeted or more intensive interventions. Is that a way to think
Yes.
about it?
Yeah, and that team consists of the school psychologist and a case manager, a special education teacher, and like it could be occupational therapist. I mean, it depends on what the needs look like, and so yeah, it's a very collaborative team that work together to figure out the needs of the kid.
Okay, so a team would consist of psychologists, occupational therapists. I would imagine teachers would be in there as well.
Teacher, yep.
And then is a social worker too is typically involved, or not necessarily, or
It depends on what setting. Like,
Okay, sure.
Like I said,
Okay.
like in secondary, I was involved in all of them, right?
Okay,
So
okay.
I was definitely part of that team. But in my current setting, I'm not a part of the team. I'm basically the person that tries to provide the intervention prior to that assessment team.
Okay.
Working with the kid.
Well, one thing, just as a clarification, you talked about the Individualized Education Plan, IEP being the acronym, and this whole idea of an IEP falls under the policy of least restrictive environment, that we keep children in general education until we determine that more is needed to kind of help with their growth and development, and that's
Absolutely.
okay.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times, instead of an IEP, there's what's called a 504 plan, where there will be some accommodations made, but it's still within the general education
Yes.
environment, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And the 504 plan, it gives students the rights to accommodations based on a variety of like medical needs or whatever, like sitting in front of the class because they have a hard time hearing or seeing, like those kind of accommodations to make sure they have access to education like everyone else.
And I think even say something like longer testing times can fit under a 504. So there can still be maybe some executive functioning challenges that kids have that don't necessarily fall under the umbrella of requiring an IEP,
Correct.
but then they get those 504 accommodations.
Yes.
Okay. Do students get referred to you for services? Because when you talk about interventions, it makes it sound to me like you're actually the one doing the referring, correct?
No. So
Okay.
basically, in the elementary setting, it could be a teacher or a parent that reaches out and say, "Hey, my kid needs some social emotional support. We're going through a family change, we're going through a divorce, a parent died. There's a variety of different things. And then I send home a permission. So I have to receive written permission from the parents in order to work with their kid. And as far as intervention, when teachers bring up a kid to our intervention team and they say, hey, I really think this kid needs support, then I reach out to the parent and say, hey, I worked with the teacher, and the teacher recommended your child for this support. This is what it looks like. This is the curriculum we're using. How do you feel about that? And if they say yes, I'll send home a permission slip, and then I'll start working with them. So I always have to receive consent from the parent.
Okay. And now you've said, and that's of course when the teacher refers, well, you always have to get consent either way, but so you sometimes will have the teacher refer. You said the parent will sometimes refer the child.
Yes, there's quite a few,
Okay.
a lot of parents, because they're like worried about their child for a variety of different reasons, and they just want them to have a safe place to talk about their feelings, or they feel like they're not expressing their feelings at home. They want them to feel like there's someone at school they can talk to. And so, yeah, a lot of parents, and especially I always say, like, we know after conferences, our caseload just doubles because a lot of conferences, parents are like, yeah, that, George is really struggling in this area. And so,
conferences, meaning these are the parent-teacher conferences, these regularly scheduled meetings, and that's when
parents request support.
And that's when you see that your caseload just strongly increase right after that. Okay. Which I guess is a good thing too, because showing that parents do have interest in trying to get, the services that their students need, or that your students need, that their child needs,
Yes.
and wanting their children to be successful, of course.
And I always rule out, like when I receive a request from a parent, is the request due to something that's interfering with their learning, right? As school social workers, our job is to support the social emotional learning and to make sure they have access to their academics. But sometimes parents are concerned about behaviors that aren't necessarily at school, like their kids are performing, they're showing up, the teacher doesn't have any concerns. But when they go home, they have a hard time with them. And so that's when I refer out to, we have school-linked therapists, therapists that utilize our building, and we provide referrals to them.
Okay, so there will be these school-linked therapists then. Those are the ones that get connected when there's the behaviors that happen at home, but not necessarily at school. And are these therapists that are they contracted then with the school? They're out in the community, or they're...
No, it's a private organization.
Okay.
And they're therapists that have clients in the community, and they have clients in our school. So it's totally separate, not necessarily a contract with our school. The only contract is we have to do background checks. You can't work with kids in the school unless you go through that process. But other than that, yeah, they do their own billing and everything. It's totally separate from our school district.
Okay. Okay. And so once the children get referred, to one of these therapists, then the therapist really just takes over from there, it sounds like. And
Yep, the therapist takes over from there. And I try to, students that I've worked with that I feel like we've met our goal, and then the parents want continued service, I refer out. And that's the transition that's kind of hard, because the parent and the kid has a relationship with me, and they trust me. And then just to hand them off is just kind of hard. But I'm always like, I'm in the school. I see you every day.
I was going to say, it's not like you lose contact with that child,
No,
right? So,
I see you at lunch. Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned one of the things I wanted to come back to is social emotional learning. Can you tell me about either sort of the theory or maybe certain models of that undergird the curriculum, or maybe even just elements of the curriculum itself that are used?
Well, we have a variety of different curriculums,
Okay.
but I tend to use zones of regulation, and it's just a way to teach kids how to name their emotion, whether it's a zone, like what color you're in, or and why. Why do you feel that way right now? And to be able to give language to it, or if they're like 5, they could just pick the color, and then the teacher knows like this kid is feeling blue, they're feeling sad today, just a way to build vocabulary around emotions. And then I co-teach a second step, which is also a social emotional curriculum, and we teach it school wide. And I'm in a 3rd grade class, and basically it teaches you about emotions, friendship, bullying, all those things. What does that look like? How to be a friend, and so just a lot of different ways of teaching kids about regulation and who to go to if you have an issue or having a hard time. So, yeah, but I can go on and on with curriculum. But yeah, that's the
Well,
major two.
no, those two I think are a great place for us to maybe. So second step, I'll just ask a couple follow-up questions here. Second step, it sounds like, is maybe targeted for slightly older children, because it sounds like you're getting into things that maybe 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds wouldn't understand quite as well, or is it even, is it adapted even for the younger children as well?
Yes.
Oh,
So
okay.
when you go on the second step, you pick the grade level. So it's K1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah.
Got it.
And
Okay.
so the curriculum looks different. The videos are different depending on the age level to make it like age appropriate. So yeah, so second step provides an opportunity for all kids to learn. And then there's like there's like a tier 2 second step where you do interventions in your office with second step. I haven't utilized that one yet, but that's another layer to second step. It's just like tier 1 is teaching the whole class. Tier 2 is teaching a small group.
Sure. Okay. For zones of regulation, is that it is, and tell me if there's more to it than this. So you talked about sort of this color coding that you use to represent emotions. Is that sort of where you start with that, or is it more involved in? So you essentially have these different colors that represent different emotions. Is that right?
Yes.
And then you're getting children to name the color zone that they're in.
Yep, you're getting kids to name what zone they are in and then why.
Okay.
So they can be able to articulate, like, I feel sad, so I'm in the blue zone. And some teachers have it where the kids, when they arrive, they put their name on what color they are. So the teacher has an idea of where they're starting their class off at. And then from there, it builds, like the curriculum builds. Then you learn when you're in this zone, what tools can you use? If you're in this other zone, like what are some coping skills you can tap into? And so it's not only naming them, but then identifying things that you can do to regulate.
Okay. So I would envision then, I'm just going to take a wild guess here. Red zone would probably be something like anger.
Anger.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. You've seen Inside Out, right? Now.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So I could see then maybe a coping skill being something like deep breathing, for that. And then that would just vary depending on what zone that they're in.
Yep, there's deep breathing, there's star breathing, and there's getting a drink of water, going for a walk, taking a break. And in each classroom at our school, we have a calming area in the classrooms, so kids can just go there whenever they need to just take a break. And there's usually like tools there, like different fidgets that they can use to calm themselves. That they have a timer, like, so they're not there all day. Yeah. And so we really have embraced it as a school to provide kids the opportunity to take care of themselves when they feel like they need to regulate.
And this may sound obvious, but maybe just to tell us what, why is social emotional learning so important? Like what does it prevent, or what does it allow for to do social emotional learning?
It's a great question. I don't. It's it's hard to access learning when you're feeling really down and out, and or you're really angry. It interferes with the part of the brain that needs to access the learning, right? And so we try to teach regulation as much as possible because at school, schools for learning and like connecting and building relationships and all those things, but it's hard to do that when you are dysregulated, and for a variety of different reasons. Like, it's hard to think about all the things our kids go through. It's really hard, and their resilience that they go through it, and they come out very successful.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that seems really important to me because if somebody arrives at school and they're really angry, there's you don't have a frontal cortex to work with at that point, right? Where the learning's supposed to be taking place, and so there has to be some regulation to
Absolutely.
help that child to be able to learn.
Yeah, one book that we read is called Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain by Zaretta Hammond. It's like a very powerful book. It talks about the science of the brain and access to learning and how like you teach kids from a variety of different cultures, like what do you put up on the walls? How do you welcome them in your class? It's just a really amazing book about like how the brain works and how to connect with different cultures.
Okay, that's good to know. When you say connect with different cultures, and you talked about, say, putting stuff up in the room or
Yeah.
whatever,
Yep.
can you give us an example of something
Yeah,
like
like
that?
pictures or photos that resemble some of the kids, like uh, a photo of someone with a hijab on, or a photo of Latin America, just like different like maps and just different things so they feel represented in their class and they feel like the class is part of their home, and so I just really think that it just shows that it signals to the kid like this is home, this is safe, I'm cared for, I'm valued, I'm honored, and just what you want. Any parent want their kid to feel that way when they go to school.
Right. Yeah, I think sometimes there's so much political baggage that gets attached to the cultural piece, and yet that cultural piece seems really important for helping kids feel like, just as you said, I have a place of belonging, and that ultimately makes it easier for them to learn and
Yeah.
to grow in whatever grade they're in.
Yeah, and it builds trust, and it builds like a loving place that they want to show up, they want to come to every day, and yeah, so we should always think about that when we're thinking about our students in our classroom and the environment.
That makes a lot of sense. I think we've gotten into this a little bit already, but many people think of outpatient therapy when they think of clinical social work. And anything else you would want to say about how you deliver services as still a clinical social worker, but in the school versus, say, an outpatient therapist?
Yeah, and besides like assessments and going through that process, I definitely operate through my clinical lens every day. I'm constantly going through the assessment process, like the questions I ask, the things I have to document. I'm always trying to look at the kid in their environment, the kid at their school, So I operate under the ecological model. Like I'm always trying to figure out this kid and their systems that they navigate through and how they're impacting their learning, right? Like, so it's like all these systems are operating around this kid, but how is it affecting their learning? Like, so that's kind of like my core thing is to get back to the learning part, right? As a school social worker. So you look through a clinical lens and how it impacts the learning.
Well, and that really speaks to being relational in the practice you do, because I mean, there's certainly the relationship between you and the child, and part of it is really understanding that child's world, that you're going to be dealing with different issues with every child, because their experiences are so different based on, the families they're with presently, their backgrounds, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely. And the family dynamics is very unique for every kid, So I don't say your parents, I say your grown-ups, because some of them are in foster care, some were grandparents, some with aunts and uncles, and just know that it's not a traditional, some people would call traditional system, and so to be aware of that.
Yeah, so that language then is not is really about, I should say, just respecting the fact that they might have different grown-ups, if you will, that they're living with, and that are taking care of them. That makes a lot of sense. Given the unique school setting, what characterizes your engagement with students or clients?
What characterized my engagement? I mean,
I guess to maybe just with that question, like how much time you spend with them, and then how that encounter might look a little different.
So I usually, especially with my littles, I try not to keep them more than 15 minutes just because I want them in the classroom learning. But when I have groups, it's a half hour that we'll meet, and there's like 3 to 4 students in a group. And usually it's very like routine. As soon as they walk in, every kid that works for me walk in my office and they draw their emotion on my board. Like that's their check-in. Like they don't even say anything. They're just like, this is how I'm feeling. Sometimes they draw 2 faces, one with tears and one happy,
Okay.
And so then they get to tell the story. And then I have this game. It's kind of like Jenga, but it's feelings tower. And so depending on the color of the cube, you have a question, and we talk about the question, and we get deep about like, what's something that made you really sad, So we just have a variety of different tools that we use to kind of engage like conversations and problem solving. Like that has been big for like my older kids. Like, how did you solve that problem? What's something you can do differently? And I'm like what people would call a warm demander, even with my little kids. So I have 100% support. Like I will take care of you, but I have like high expectations.
A warm demander. I really like that.
Yeah. So like they just know like, okay, I should have did that differently. I'm like, yep. And so, but they know like I don't know. I feel like I've had a lot of success with students I work with. I'm not bragging, but I'm just saying. I just feel like that has been really helpful. I always think like some people don't realize like having expectations and being consistent and being firm is not bad. It's kids feel safe. They know what to expect. They know like, okay, I worked on this, Miss Quinnita, look at this strategy I used, and they're just so proud of them. So I don't know. That's kind of a long way to respond to that.
No, I like that though, because I think even that warm demander, I really hear a strengths focus from you in that we're, the reason you demand that is because your kids are,
they can do it.
they can do it.
They're totally capable. And Yeah, and you work with a variety of different social workers that have different styles, which is totally fine. But
Hmm.
that's just kind of my style, and I just see a lot of progress in my students. Even when I was in high school, like I was probably like a demander. Yeah, but super supportive and try to get them gift cards, bus card, whatever they need, so they can be successful and get to their job and do all that stuff. So I don't know. I've I've had a variety of different experiences, but not my style doesn't work for every kid. So I just know that.
And that I would say that's pretty characteristic of clinical
Yeah.
practice.
Yeah.
And I will say too, though, that and I'm kind of circling back to something we talked about earlier when you say you have a psychologist, an occupational therapist, teacher that's involved, that kids have more than one opportunity
Yes.
to sort of latch on to an adult relationship that really is empowering and helpful for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, and their teacher is essential. That bond between the student and the teacher is so important. And there's uh, when there's like a tension between a student and teacher, that's when my job gets a little complicated.
Oh, sure.
Because as a social worker, you're supporting teachers, you're supporting your students, and you're supporting their parents, admin. Like you just you're like a glue. You got to keep everything together. So I just feel like that teacher-student relationship is really important.
Well, and I think this comes back to the ecological model that you talked about, and the importance of your role as social worker is, as you just described, I much better than I could have, as you're that glue that is trying to hold everything together, and so with all the different players, that's kind of your role, is to kind of create understanding relationships between these folks, and all ultimately in the service of the child, with the child being, I would imagine, sort of the primary client, if you will.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And I guess one strength I would say that may work in my favor, or it's just put on me, is working with parents that are very angry, right? Um, people have had like historical experience with education, right? And a historical trauma, right? And so to know that there's some distrust with parents, with the education system and what they're doing, how they're blaming their kid, and so I I understand that, so I'm able to really connect with them. So most admin would have me work with the parent when they're very angry.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So, one thing I wanted to ask: what social, structural, or political factors impact your ability, either for good or for ill, to provide services to the students?
Well, um, I think being respectful and mindful that uh, kids are coming from households with different beliefs than mine, right? And my beliefs are mine, but I have to be respectful of all beliefs, and understanding like sometimes they say things to their friends based on what they've learned at home, and unfortunately there's sometimes consequences for it because some things are like very hurtful, to children. And so in the elementary setting, they think like they don't know any better, right? Like this, they just heard this from home. So they excuse the behavior. Like they said that, but they don't really know what it means. But then the impact it has on the other kid, and that kid goes home and say, this kid said this to me, like the harm that it caused. So that's why we have to take it serious no matter what, just because it could be a teaching moment for the kid, like
Sure.
learning, like, why is that impactful to this other kid?
Well, that ultimately is part of social emotional learning too, right? Is that's where the rubber meets the road. Is that's the social piece of it. Do you have an example in mind that you could share?
I have an example of a kid saying, a first grader calling a friend the N word.
Okay.
And then the other kid didn't know what the N word meant, right? So that's the tricky part, right? They don't know what it meant, but they knew it was mean. And they went home and they said, this kid called me this. And the parent was just upset, very frustrated, very hurt,
I'm sure.
and wanted to know, how is the school going to respond to this behavior? Even though the kid didn't know, the other kid probably didn't really know what it meant either. Just heard it from somewhere else, you know? And so that's the tricky part. It's just like the innocence of them not knowing, but then them learning and in such a like painful way, you know? It's the hard part about like that social emotional learning, like learning how to navigate what's socially appropriate and what's not, you know.
Right. And like you said, it's there is still, even if it's unintended, there's still the impact. And I mean, that's something we are still learning as adults. We say things that, there was even a small example right here in our conversation where I referred to parents and you said, well, I call them grown-ups. I mean, that's a form of correction. And I think it's a legitimate form of correction because it really brings to bear, it brings in sharp relief the reality of what are the situations, and they're all very different situations at home. And so, and I imagine though with a child that becomes tricky with trying to learn, look, I know you didn't mean this, and there's still, it's not okay to say this word to another person.
Yes. Yes. And I mean, it gets even tricky with books. Parents are concerned about books that we're sending home, and so that gets tricky. Like, why are you guys teaching my kids this stuff? And it's, even though we're trying to teach them about a variety of different cultures, not all cultures want their kids to know about other cultures, and I mean, you see it like even on like, the political realm about removing books from schools and stuff like that. And so yeah, that gets tricky.
Yeah, it gets really tricky because there are some, I think too, just sometimes those can be value conflicts just about, and I don't know this for sure, not working in the schools, but it might even be something like, we know this is a reality. I don't necessarily want my child to learn this at the age they're at right now, or something like that, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep.
And I think those are the things we're constantly going to have to be ironing out as we go along, because you want to be respectful to everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody involved.
Yeah.
And still be in service to all the students who need, sort of the support they need to be successful in school.
And that's kind of like the book I mentioned. It's like reading books that reflect the students in the classroom. Like all the books reflect, a certain group, but can we have some that reflect their experience, their lived experience, their food, or videos that like celebrates their culture and their religion, and just to educate everyone about like the differences is okay,
Right.
so they don't feel like no one understands me,
Right. And I think that does get tricky because the same is true of, I would imagine a place where big value conflict could happen is if you have a child with gay parents, two dads or two moms.
Yeah.
And there's, well, we already know about all the culture wars associated with the with the LGBTQ issues. And the fact of the matter is, you've got a child in school who has two gay parents,
Yes.
and that is the way some families are arranged, and you want people to, even if their beliefs don't align with it, even if they feel like that's not a place where they think it's right, they still have to you still have to try to develop this kind of respect between all people to well, we can still respect other family makeups.
Yep. We can still coexist together. But yeah, that is reality. Like during Ramadan, like when kids were fasting, and then they had prayer and all that stuff, and so kids were curious, like, what's going on? And so that's when they started learning more about it, and so I just feel like kids are curious and they want to learn, and they're more resilient than some adults, like, honestly. But yeah, just learning about that whole process and what you have to do.
Yeah, I think that's a really great example too, because we have a large segment of the population in the Twin Cities and surrounding areas that celebrate Ramadan.
Yes.
And I think it's really important to, and here, this is Lance giving his opinion, just to be clear.
Okay.
It seems important to have, all religions, respected for whatever their holidays or beliefs are. And there's nothing wrong with educating students about that, whether that's
Kwanzaa. I mean,
right.
Yep. Yeah.
and still Christmas, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
Christmas.
of course, everybody. I mean, Christmas seems to be the one that pretty much everybody knows, but
Yeah.
but and then the and Yom Kippur,
Yeah.
from a Jewish holiday, and so all those things seem really important to understand, and just to get a sense of where people are coming from in their own cultural beliefs and development.
Yeah, and to learn something new doesn't mean you have to uphold it, right? Like, we
Right.
read books all the time. That doesn't mean that we're gonna live up to whatever we read. We just learn. We have more information. We can have a better understanding.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it. All right, so one question I like to ask my guests at the end is, what advice would you give to beginning social workers if they were to consider the type of work you do?
I would say school social work is a wonderful job. It's very hard. It's I'm not selling it, huh? No, it's hard, but it's rewarding, and you get to work with like a variety of different students, and you work with like every agency. I work with the county, homeless shelters, foster parents, truancy. Like, you're tapping into like hospital, like day treatment programs, like therapists. I work with a variety of different mental health professionals. It's like schools are like a hub, and then all the rest of the organization just kind of connect to us. And so just know that if you get into school social work, you're not going to be limited to just school. You're going to be able to connect with a variety of different organizations and learn about a variety of different organizations throughout the process. But yeah, just know that there's like a lot of opportunity. You're usually in a teacher's contract, so it's a union job. If that means anything, but
That's a good sell there.
yeah, you have a pension that they don't exist anymore, but yeah, so it's a great job. I mean, every day is a mystery. You walk in, don't come in with a plan, because you just never know what's gonna knock on your door, and that's the beauty of the job. You're just like, you have to just like think all day and you're moving all day. And so it's great. You'll love it.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to end. And I the only thing, I hate to add anything to that other than just to say I think it's so it really encapsulates the spirit of social work practice too, where you're really, coming back to the glue metaphor of really trying to make sure that all these systems are working together for the children.
Yep. And once you see it work together, you see them grow and you see them happy and you see them like mature. That's the thing I like about elementary is I get to watch the students for 6 years,
That would be really gratifying.
It is. Yeah. You see them in kindergarten, then all of a sudden they're in 5th grade. You're like, whoa,
Yeah.
So, and just to be a part of that journey with them and their parents, it's awesome.
All right. Well, thank you so much for this interview today. This has been really delightful to learn about school social work. As we close today, I want to thank Peter Monahan and all others who have worked with him in the studio to make this podcast possible. Additionally, I express my gratitude to the University of St. Thomas for providing the resources for this show. And finally, a special thank you again to Quinnita for joining us today.